Maxey from outside. Sixers lead, courtesy of Tyrese Maxey.
Deep to left field, going back is Locastro. It is gone!
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Beef Up Front podcast here on Pick Swap Media. Your host, Ryan Coyle, as always, continuing on with our college football preview series today, recording this on Tuesday, August 20th. This will be released later, a little bit later in the week, but we're so close, as we said yesterday while we were recording. It's game week. We're finally here. We have live action on Saturday, kicking off with Florida State and Georgia Tech. To kick off the 2024 college football season. And I don't think any team enters the season in the entire country this year with more pressure than today's episode, and that is the Ohio State Buckeyes. I think from the offseason that they had with all the players that they were able to retain, we'll get into all that. The rumors of a $25 million NIL payroll that they were able to shell out this offseason. The transfers they brought in, the talent that they retained. And then Ryan Day entering the year after having lost, leading the team as the head coach, but also the entire program, losing the past 3 games to Michigan. Michigan going on and winning the national title last year. Michigan going to the playoff the year before. Ohio State was able to make it the year before, but they come up short to Georgia in that one as well. And you got a pressure cooker here. And it's pretty insane to say it with Ryan Day. 56-8 entering year 6 at Ohio State. I mean, he just doesn't really lose unless it's to Michigan these days. But you got to remember how dominant Ohio State was before kind of Jim Harbaugh had gone on this little 3-game win streak. Now Harbaugh's gone. Ryan Day, the pressure's on him, though, to beat Sherrone Moore. Sherrone Moore was the interim coach last year when Harbaugh was suspended by the Big Ten for the sign-stealing scandal and so on. But Ohio State dominated that rivalry before, and I think that I'm not sure if they're going to get back to full domination of it, but for most of my lifetime, this was an Ohio State rivalry. Michigan has kind of taken it over the past few years. I think we're going to see more of a true rivalry kind of back and forth instead of these teams going on these crazy runs going forward. But Ryan Day, 56-8 entering year 6, and it's pretty insane to say that he's on the hot seat with that kind of record. Hasn't even lost 10 games yet as a college head coach, and people want him gone because he's not able to beat Michigan. That's how important that game is to these Ohio State fans. So much pressure on this team. They enter the season as number 2 in the country, just behind Georgia, one of the obviously favorites to win the national title, the favorite to win the Big Ten. But all the pressure in the world on this team. It'll be interesting to see how they kind of carry themselves. I mean, Georgia, I don't think obviously has pressure as the number 1 team, the favorite to win it all. But I don't think as much pressure because of those 2 national titles. Ryan Day doesn't have a national title to himself yet. They hadn't won one since back when Urban Meyer won it in the first college football playoff, I believe that was, with Zeke and Cardell Jones. But just a amazing story of kind of how they got here. I mean, everything looked fine and dandy. Now the pressure's on. You can't lose to Michigan again. And they're saying even if they win the Big Ten, they go undefeated in the regular season or 11-0 until that Michigan game, they lose to Michigan in the final game, and just say still they go to the Big Ten and win the Big Ten title game, and they go to the playoff, win the national championship. Sure, the fans are going to be happy, but they're still going to say there's an asterisk next to that title for us because we didn't beat Michigan. That's how just important that game is and how much it means to that entire university. So much pressure, and they're going to have all eyes on them each and every week throughout the season, per usual. But when you look at 2023, 11-2, 8-1 in the Big Ten, enter that Big Ten title game against Michigan, the final game of the season where they lost to Michigan 30-24. Then they go and lose in the Cotton Bowl to Missouri 14-3. People are kind of deflated after that. So many opt-outs. That really wasn't the true team, but that racks up their second loss of the season. No real momentum, I guess, off of that. People like to use those bowl games as momentum builders kind of now, and that's more for like a 7-8 win team. When you're Ohio State and you don't make the playoff, kind of, all bets are off from there. The one game out of the New Year's 6 that wasn't part of the playoff that seemed like it really meant something was that Penn State Ole Miss game, because both those teams have a lot of momentum or expect to do a lot of things heading into this 2024 season. They had a lot of guys retained, a lot of guys playing that bowl game. That was the one true like New Year's Six game, other than the playoff games, that actually meant something. So I didn't buy too much into that Mizzou beating Ohio State thing, but still the offense looked absolutely terrible in that, and they made some significant changes, kind of, especially at the quarterback spot, play caller, running back spot this all season that we'll get into. But as we said, third straight year losing to Michigan. Michigan goes on to win the Big Ten title, college football playoff title, and Ohio State just deems that season really as a failure. Nothing else matters in the eyes of that fan base. 9 of their 11 wins last year were by double digits. They had that awesome, one of the best games, I think, of the college football season. Wasn't the prettiest, but was a real great football game down to the wire. That 17-14 win over Notre Dame came down to the final seconds. Defense was leaps and bounds better than the offense last year, and that's not something that we've been used to saying at Ohio State. The offense under Ryan Day, even under Urban Meyer, has just been, otherworldly, like one of the, if not premier offenses in the entire sport. They were called soft the past 2 years with the Michigan stuff, with Michigan kind of pushing them around and just kind of asserting their dominance up front. Ohio State has a really good bounce back year on the defensive side of the ball last year, and they might even be better this year. The defense was 3rd in total defense last year and 2nd in scoring defense. Offense, only 44th in scoring offense and 47th in total offense. So a pretty terrible year, I would say, to Ohio State's standards, with all the talent that they have. And a lot of the scrutiny was thrown towards Kyle McCord, the quarterback last year. He was basically kind of pushed out the door saying, like, you're not going to be the guy for us this year. You could stay and compete if you want, but somebody else is probably going to be coming in here and taking your job. He goes out the door. He transfers to Syracuse. Will Howard is brought in from Kansas State to play quarterback. And here we are. We're heading into 2024 season. Will Howard just the other day named officially the starting quarterback for Ohio State, and he looks to revamp this offense and take it to new heights. When you look at the offensive side of the ball, though, I think when we talk about the transfer portal these days and all the players being able to kind of the freedom of movement, one of the biggest acquisitions of the entire season actually came on the offensive coaching staff for Ohio State. That's when Chip Kelly steps down as the head coach of UCLA, and he goes to Ohio State to be the play caller and the offensive coordinator for the Ohio State Buckeyes this year under Ryan Day. And it's a reverse kind of story, because Ryan Day was Chip Kelly's kind of protege, learned under Chip Kelly, played for Chip Kelly. So for Chip Kelly to come in here, kind of take a backseat and say, basically, I just want to coach X's and O's. I don't want to deal with all the CEO stuff. And he's just going to go out there and do what he does best, and that's orchestrate offense. He's brought in here to rejuvenate this offense that was not up to Ohio State standards last year. As we said, finishing 44th in scoring at 30.5 points per game. Some of those numbers are even kind of inflated by a weak non-conference that they played at times as well. 87th in rushing, which is really bad. 30th in passing and 47th in total. I mean, with all the talent they had, those are inexcusable numbers. And when you look at, I think, the main reason why they couldn't feel confident in that Michigan game and go win that Michigan game, the limited passing attack, I think, with McCord kind of at the helm. When you have a Marvin Harrison Jr., when you have Emeka Egbuka, even Julian Fleming there last year, you have all these star kind of players at the receiver spot, and you still are only 30th in passing, 44th in scoring, 47th in total. You're not going to be able to go out there and execute when it matters most against a Michigan defense that was really dominant last year. So inexcusable numbers. Will Howard and Chip Kelly are going to be having a lot of pressure on them to change that this year and flip that kind of attack. I look at this rushing attack and think it has, with Kelly orchestrating it, the potential to be the best rushing attack in the entire country. Howard is an athlete at quarterback, measures in at 6'4", about 225. It said he lost some weight this offseason, isn't just like better physical shape. He's always been a big dude, but 6'4", 225, that's like outside linebacker, pass rusher type of weight. This is a big guy. He can run you over, but he also has some speed. So you have that element in the quarterback run game that you didn't have before with Kyle McCord, and now you have Chip Kelly with his read option kind of offense there in the running game in the backfield. That's going to be a hard match for most teams. And then you bring back Travion Henderson. He's an electric back, one of the guys that have breakaway speed at the running back spot in the country. And then they bring in Quinshon Judkins, transfer running back from Ole Miss, who's one of, if for my money, one of the 5 best running backs in the entire country. You're going to have these two guys kind of sharing reps. Who knows how that works out in the long run? Is one guy getting pissed off that he's not getting the ball when it matters most, etc. But I look at it as you're going to have to play a deep season if you're Ohio State and you're expecting a national title. You're going to have to play potentially 16, 17 games. You're going to have basically an NFL regular season there. Guys are going to miss some time. You're going to have guys that need to step up, but also sharing touches. That's going to allow these guys to stay fresh for the long haul, kind of when it matters most. Judkins isn't going to have to carry it 25 times. Travion Henderson's not going to have to carry it 20 times. You split these guys up 10 and 12 carries. Will Howard gets 5-6 carries, and there you go from there. And you have a great passing game, most likely to go with it, with all the receivers that they have. So good luck stopping that running game. The main question is, how big of an upgrade is Will Howard ultimately over McCord? We talked about it, at least in the rushing game, but 3rd and 5, 4th and 5, game on the line. Can he get you that first down? Is Will Howard that guy? He showed elements of clutchness before going and winning a Big 12 title at Kansas State, but rumors were that he struggled with the downfield passing game in the spring. He hasn't always been such a polished passer, but is Chip Kelly and Ryan Day, and definitely the most talent that he's ever had around him, able to get more out of him? That's the question. I think that's what Ohio State kind of bought into, some more potential there. But Julian Sayin, backup quarterback, most likely the next option behind Howard, a 5-star a 5-star recruit. He's not going to have the longest leash, Howard. If he's struggling and a guy like Sayin, the coaching staff has faith in him, he's going to have the opportunity, I think, to go in there because, as we said, it's kind of national title or bust in the eyes of many for Ohio State this year. Emeka Egbuka is back, though. He should have been a first-round pick last year if he went to the draft. He's one of the star receivers, all-American type guys at the receiver spot in the country. He opts to return. Sophomore Carnell Tate, he looks like a budding star, had some great moments last year. And then the number 1 recruit in the country who's been making waves in fall camp, Jeremiah Smith at the wide receiver spot. Expect him to be a Marvin Harrison-esque receiver, that good of a player, make that much of a major impact. And he could be doing things as a freshman that Marvin Harrison wasn't even doing, because Marvin Harrison still had Chris Olave, Jackson Smith, and Jigba ahead of him. Jeremiah Smith's going to get the opportunity to kind of go out there and play on the field from day one. Offensive line returns 3 starters. This is kind of the group's main concern on this offense. They do bring in center Seth McLaughlin from Alabama, one of the best centers in the country. Obviously, he was known for a lot last year, his bad snaps, especially in the college football playoff to Jalen Milroe. But when it comes down to the blocking and holding his own, he's one of the best centers in the country. But the offensive line, I would say, is the main concern kind of this offense, as well as how well Howard translates. But I do think the offensive line might be a little bit more of a concern with all the talent this offense has, though. I think the line just has to be solid, just has to be average. Can't let opposing teams like a Michigan wreck a game for them, like Oregon when they play them in the regular season, or if they meet some of these teams, these Big Ten teams in the title game potentially. They can't let these other defensive lines wreck the game. The offensive line just has to be able to hold their own and give these guys on offense enough room to operate, because that's how talented they are. They don't need, the greatest blocking. They don't need the best offensive line in the country. Will Howard just needs to be able to kind of get the ball out of his hands and get the ball into these playmakers' hands, because they can do the rest from there. So should be a super electric offense. I think it's going to be the best rushing offense in the entire country this year. When you look at the defense, as we talked about at the beginning, the offense for Ohio State, especially under Ryan Day, has been the calling card, the pedigree for this kind of team. The defense last year was flat out insane. Looking at the numbers today, I remember looking at throughout the year last year, but looking back at it today, to shout out to defensive coordinator Jim Knowles. Came over from Oklahoma State last year. I believe was his second year, going into his 3rd year. Second in scoring at 11.2 points per game, 27th in rushing at 119.5 yards per game, 1st in passing at 145.9 yards per game, and 3rd in total defense at 265.4 yards per game. They held opponents to 14 or less in 10 of their 13 games. And on top of that, they're bringing back 8 starters from that defensive squad. And it starts up front with Jack Sawyer and JT returning at defensive ends. Those are 2 of, if not the best defensive end in the country. That's an elite pairing. I put that right up there with kind of Florida State with Patrick Payton, Marvin Jones Jr. as that kind of level of duo. These guys are really good. They can be game wreckers as well. I mean, JT did that a few years ago. We saw that single-handedly against Penn State back in 2022. And then they have a really good 1-2 punch at defensive tackle with Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton in the mix there. If they had one kind of weak point on that defense last year, it was the rush defense. And still, that was a really good unit, 27th in the country. But you're bringing back 4 guys that played a ton of snaps for you last year. That defensive line and the run game, or the run defense should improve even more. But when you look at the pass defense, when you're first in the country against the pass, people are going to opt more times than not to just try and run the football on you. So you can kind of, take one with the other. It's like, all right, we can't throw on these guys. We have to force the run, and eventually you're going to get some yardage. So you can't really look at that as too much of a negative. 27th in the country. That's still, one of the top rush defenses in the country last year. So that's a unit I expect to be even better, but not like it was a terrible or even average unit last year. The experience and talent is there on this defensive side of the ball to be potentially even better last year. Cody Simon is back at linebacker. He technically wasn't a starter last year, but from what I was reading and from kind of just watching them last year, he was the guy you saw making a lot of the plays, and the team believes he was kind of their best linebacker. It's good to have him back there in the middle. And the secondary, as we talked about, the first-ranked pass defense last year in the entire country, they're absolutely loaded, and I'll take that secondary against anyone in the country. They bring back cornerback Denzel Burke, who is going into his fourth year as a starter for Ohio State. That's unheard of these days. It's another guy that could have gone to the draft last year and stayed back. And then they bring in safety Caleb Downs, the sophomore transfer from Alabama. Him and Walter Nolan were kind of 1 and 2. It was kind of pick your poison of which defensive player you rated the highest in the portal, but he was awarded the best freshman in the entire country last year, had 107 tackles as a freshman at Alabama, another big-time pickup there for Ohio State and what's already a loaded defense. Those two headline the defensive backfield that also has multiple starters back, guys that have played a lot of snaps. So this group is as good as it comes, and I think they are the best defense in the country as we head into the 2024 season. So best defense in the country, what I think is going to be the best rushing attack potentially in the country, and a chance to have one of the most explosive passing games in the country too, if Will Howard's able to pan out. So lofty expectations, lofty praise for this Ohio State team from me. I'll run through their schedule real quick. As we said, they enter the year at number 2 in the country. Share the screen here. Start out with some cupcakes. They have a schedule that is eerily similar to what Georgia had last year in the non-conference. Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, they're going to be huge favorites on all that one. I think Akron game, they're like a 48.5-point favorite or something. Just 3 absolute cupcakes off the top. Then you get Michigan State, who I've been seeing some people kind of buying into a little bit, but this is the beginning of the season. I think Michigan State will be a tougher team towards the end, but that should be another easy win there. You move to 4-0. Iowa, always tough just because of the defense, but I don't think they're going to be able to score on this Ohio State defense. That game could be ugly, lower scoring, but I will give Ohio State the win there. This is one of, if not the most anticipated game of the regular season in college football. I think you can kind of put this up there with Ohio State, Michigan, with Texas versus Georgia, with Alabama versus Georgia. But this got to be up there in your top 5, top 10 games of the year when Ohio State travels to Oregon for the first time in Big Ten play. I will have Ohio State tripping up here. I just think, virtue of the home field advantage, these are the 2 top teams in the Big Ten in my eyes. Oregon will be getting into in a couple days here on the podcast, but that is a coin flip, I would say, but I'm just going to give the benefit of the doubt to the home team in that one in Oregon. If that was at Ohio State, I give Ohio State the win. It's pretty plain and simple there. Nebraska. I have Nebraska actually going 7-0 heading into this game, so I'd be very interested to see what this looks like, especially with Ohio State coming off a loss and a bye. They kind of have a bit of a sour taste in their mouth and kind of kick Nebraska back to earth a little bit. But still a 7-1 start for Nebraska. They would be doing backflips. That's already bowl eligible. But I'm going to give Ohio State the win there at home, coming off a bye, coming off the Oregon game. That one should be a pretty comfortable win. Penn State at Penn State. That's going to be Penn State's biggest game of the year. Obviously, Penn State potentially getting over the hump. We know James Franklin's struggles against these top flight squads, especially Michigan and Ohio State. But I do have Ohio State going into Happy Valley and winning. I think every spot you can point to on that team, Ohio State might just be a little bit better. Will Howard, then Aller, Quinshon Junkins, and Travion Henderson over Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. The wide receivers are unquestionably better. Edge rusher Abdul Carter, you can put him up there with Sawyer and JT. Like every spot, Ohio State might just still be a little bit better. Home field advantage. Who knows what happens? Happy Valley, not an easy place to go into, but I'm going to have Ohio State winning that game there. But you look at Ohio State's 2 toughest games at Oregon, at Penn State, both games on the road. That's a bit of a challenge. So you got to think if they're, I think they're happy if they're able to kind of split those games there. Purdue, I'm going to have that be an easy win. I think Purdue's at the bottom of the Big Ten. Northwestern, a win there. Wrigley Field, that should be a pretty cool game though. Indiana's a team a lot of people are higher on than last year, and kind of with the new regime, but that should be another easy win by Ohio State. And then Michigan, I'm expecting a downer year from Michigan, like a 9-3 coming off that undefeated national title year. Lost so much, but this is the game. This is what matters most. Even if they lose to Oregon and to Penn State, I mean, you have to beat Michigan then. You're not going to the playoff at all. That's probably the most pressure Ryan Day ever has. If he loses all three of these games, he's definitely fired. But if you split those and you lose to Michigan, you're probably, I would say, not even. You're definitely not going to go to the Big Ten title game, I would say, in that scenario, and you're probably not going to the playoff as well. So if you lose one of these games to Penn State or Oregon, that Michigan game becomes even bigger. Or you're undefeated, you're on the table, and you go into that game, and there's still a ton of pressure on you because then Michigan has a chance to ruin your perfect season. So everything is going to come down to that at the end of the day. I don't see them losing more than one game between the Penn State and the Oregon game. And you have a ton of pressure once you get to that Michigan game. But the Michigan game, you get them at home, so you like their chances there. I have Ohio State finishing the regular season at 11-1. That one loss coming to Oregon. Oregon, I have, we'll talk about down the line, but I have Oregon in the Big Ten title game as well. I have Ohio State beating Oregon in the Big Ten title game, and I have Ohio State winning the national title. Ohio State is my national champion pick for 2024. I think the revenge tour kind of goes on. Ryan Day goes out and shows that he's a great coach. Chip Kelly brings that offense back to life. They are plus 300, plus 380 to win the national title. So that is, I don't know quite on the value of that, because I think even if they just say they lose to Oregon, you might be able to get it at a better number or even before the playoffs start. I mean, the matchups are so dependent. Like plus 380, I don't know if it's worth taking a swing on it that much. Like Georgia at plus 300. Then you look at the next two teams, plus 750 for Oregon, plus 850 for Texas. Like this is a long, long season that you have to go through. So it's going to probably be a no bet for me. But if you're making me pick a national title team on August 20th, I'm going with the Ohio State Buckeyes. I'm going with an 11-1 regular season, but then I'm having them win the Big Ten title game over Oregon. And then that gets them one of the top 4 seeds in my predictions, the second seed. And I have them running the table from there. And they're your first ever 12-team college football playoff national champion. So lofty expectations for me for this Ohio State squad this year, and lofty expectations from everyone. The pressure's on. It's now or never for Ryan Day. And it should be a fun season watching the Buckeyes. So as always, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and we'll talk soon.